Hello everyone, this is Serious Trivia, and today we're going to be ranking all the units available to the Bandit factions in Total War 3 Kingdoms. As you can probably already see from the sheer number of units here on the screen, this is going to be an epic task, and a fitting conclusion to our tier list unit series. Of course, in the future, when new units are added to the game through patches and DLCs, I will definitely revisit this unit tier list series to update them, but for now, we're going to shift our attention away from units for a while, as future tier lists will instead focus on generals, since it has been highly requested by all of you. Now, getting back to this task at hand, we have a total of 56 units listed here, but only 14 of them are strictly bandit units, while the other 42 units belong to other various subcultures in the game, where they are Han units, Yellow Turban units, Naman units, or even 8 Princess units, as the Bandit faction can utilize their unique Bandit network reform system to acquire limited quantities of each of these units. So while it will take us a while to actually rank all of these units into this tier list, the good news here is that the unit overview portion of this video will be quite short, as we only have to cover the Bandit units, as all the other units have actually been covered already before with their own respective groups. So let's not waste any more time and jump into a custom battle right now to take a more detailed look at all of these bandit units. Alrighty, so here we are in custom battle, and right off the bat we're going to start out with what's very similar to the militia units in the base game for the Han factions. Bandits get one unit of each color that's shared among all the classes, and they're similar to the militia unit in that they don't have formations. And starting off with the melee infantry, or the purple variation, we have the bandit warriors. And these units are good baselines to judge the rest of our units, as the bandits don't have that many units that have no recruitment restrictions. So starting with these bandit warriors, they are assault troops, good against armor, dual wielding, has an axe, so they do get the shield breaker effect, which will lower enemy shield units' evasion and shield armor. They have very weak charge, which I feel like is their main drawback, because they're supposed to be these assault troops that you charge in, but the melee charge bonus is poor. They have good attack. It's a bit slow because it's dual wielding, but 33 damage on armor piercing is pretty high, and 13 in base is not that bad. Defensively, there's not much to speak of, and they're pretty fast unit thanks to the low armor. And that's pretty much it for this unit. And then moving on, we have a polearm variation. So these are called bandit gains. They are a shielded polearm unit, similar to a weaker spear guard. The damage is lower. It's still heavily skewed to armor piercing though, so that's nice. And the charge, compared to what's supposed to be a more assault troop in the bandit warrior, is quite similar, 61, 65. Not that much difference, and the shield that you get on this unit gives it 55% range block chance. Now of course you don't get any formation, so it's not going to go any higher, but that's still pretty good. Armor's decent at 30%, and because you have a shield yourself, you get an extra 5% from the shield. So overall, I think this unit does quite a good job for what it's designed for. It's a good frontline unit that's anti-range, anti-cavalry, and it's a pretty decent baseline unit for the bandit faction. Then moving on, we have the last of our infantry group in the range unit, and this is the bandit hunters. Now these units will have a very similar range setup to the standard archers. They do have different sets of boosts from various bandit generals, so you see a little bit higher base range damage. But in all honesty, their range damage is the 25-15 setup. These are just boosted figures. So they have the same damage output as your standard archer unit, which is not bad. They have the archer range. So for a militia quality unit, you have the same setup as an archer. So comparatively speaking, I would say this is a pretty good unit. And they tend to do okay in melee as well, compared to archer units and archer militias, with a decent amount of melee charge. And you can see here they have access to different arrow types beyond the regular one. Flaming shot is pretty standard, and then you have poison shot. Now you need to have the right skills unlocked to get these, but poison is a new addition for the bandit factions, and the poison damage is actually quite different. So we've seen poison tipped spears and arrows on non-mine units before, and that was just about 56 damage ticked down over 15 seconds. The poison arrows for the bandits are quite different. They're called poison shot. The base damage is low. The poison tick damage is not crazy high, 15 damage over 15 seconds, but you get suppression effect on it. The unit that is poison will lose speed, will lose charge speed, will lose melee evasion, will lose melee base damage. So it's actually super strong over the duration of the poison, which is 15 seconds, and you can reapply it by firing again. So poison is a very legit strategy for bandit factions, unlike the poison damage that you get from Sanjiang spear units in the Nanman faction, or the Sanjiang archers. I think they're blow darts, poison tip blow darts, and hidden viper units. That poison is pure damage, no suppression, but the poison shot of the ability you unlock from bandit character actually give you other debuffs to enemy unit, so quite nice. And then moving on, we have bandit marauders. Now these are the melee infantry variation, and you can see that they don't actually carry a shield, but because they are melee infantry, they get a base 20% range block chance, and it can be improved if you hire a regular Hun general that's a commander and get the nobility skill. It can be improved to 40%, but nobility skills do not exist on bandit commanders, so I would say normally you wouldn't have it, but it's quite easy to capture a Han commander, so it's not like saying it's impossible. And on top of that, you do still have the 50% missile resistant because you are a melee cavalry. And in terms of weapons, you're dual wielding similar to the setup on the bandit warriors, the dual held weapons here with the axe. So you do get shield breaker, but I think for what they're designed for as melee cavalry, they kind of fail as a ranged tank. And if you want to send them against shielded units, maybe shielded cavalry, they could do well there. So perhaps they're kind of anti-enemy melee cavalry, but still not really well designed for what makes melee cavalry strong. Charge is not super high, 99, that's actually quite low. You have a cavalry unit that doesn't break 100, that's not a good sign. We already talked about the damage. They have the same exact weapon as the bandit warriors, so they have the same exact damage as the bandit warriors, same exact armor. They're basically bandit warriors on horse with higher charge and 20% range block chance that just appeared out of nowhere. And the speed is good because the armor is low. And then you have a shock cavalry. These are called bandit raiders, and they have decent charge, 169. I wouldn't call that high because Lancer militias have 190. So these are actually kind of low for a shock cavalry. Damage is high. You have a very high damaging armor piercing spear, 37 on the armor piercing, 8 on the base. So that's good. Light armor, fast speed, pretty much designed to do what shock cavalry's designed to do, to kill off vulnerable troops while being kind of glass cannon themselves. So in that aspect, I think they're decent, but obviously stat wise, they're all very low. And for kind of militia quality unit, this is what you would kind of expect. And aside from these 5 default units that you get, bandit units, each faction has a few unique bandit units. So we're going to jump from bandit faction to faction, starting with Yan Baihu here, who has 4 unique units. Now, even though these are called bandit faction unique units, because of the bandit reform tree or the bandit network, certain units in each faction can be acquired by all 3 bandit factions. High tier versions are not available. For example, from the reform tree, you can get hidden axes, but you can't get Fists of the Bandit Queen. And for Yan Baihu's faction, you can get everything except for White Tiger Raiders. These are off limit to other factions. And then for Zhang Yan's faction, I believe you can get everything except for Black Mountain Hunters. I'm actually not sure, but I think one of them is off limit. We'll talk about recruitment restriction when we do the actual ranking. I'll talk about which units you can get how many of, and I'm pretty sure you can't get hunters and you can't get marauders. I think the only ones available is the outlaw, but that's not important for this part. We're just trying to get used to each unit. So with Yan Baihu's force, we're gonna start with the one over here. So he has a Yue unit and a White Tiger unit. Now Yue refers to Nanyue, which used to be a kingdom down south. This comes from his unique county building. If you build that, you can recruit these, and they also exist on the reform tree, as we mentioned. And these Yue Remnant Warriors are actually super strong and super good value. If we look at the damage, 25 attack speed for dual wielding. That's pretty good. We already seen a couple dual wielding unit with 20 attack speed. And damage is off the chart, even though it's mainly on the base damage, but still extremely high, because if you look at it, you're looking at a total of 63 damage, distribution 50-13, so it's kind of heavily distributed towards base damage, but even if you reduce that a bit, it's still quite decent. And then you have very decent evasion, 27%, and 45% armor, which for bandit units is actually quite high. Like 53 is like a heavily armored unit for regular factions, so 45% for a bandit is quite nice, and they're slower because of that, but they have decent charge for infantry, right? You're almost matching the melee cavalry variant from what we saw earlier at 98, so this is quite a good unit. And on top of that, they have certain traits like stock, which means they can move on scene. Now, I believe this is not defaulted on the unit, but rather every unit we're showcasing here would have this because we have the right generals. But regardless, they have guerrilla deployment, ignore force penalty. These are very similar trends you're gonna see. This is what they're unique. They have encourage, so they can give morale boost to nearby allies, which is quite nice because a lot of the bandit units are deemed low tier, so they actually have low morale, and this will help them out a little bit. But overall, what makes them stand out is just the high damage with decent fast attack speed for dual wielders. Then we have another Yue unit. These are the Yue tribesmen, and they're your anti-cavalry polearm unit. They actually have decent charge for being a polearm unit. Usually polearm units don't have high charge, barely skewed towards armor piercing for their damage. So the comparison for these would be spear warriors, and it definitely makes sense. They're probably slightly heavier armored versions of spear warriors with good charge, high armor piercing damage. Other than that, their weakness is obviously no range block chance, and that's really what's going to hold them back. Although you could try a lot of ambush tactics with bandit factions, but even in those cases, maybe you don't want your spear unit to be the one charging out from the forest. Then moving on, we have White Tiger units, starting with White Tiger Warriors. So these guys are actually quite interesting in my opinion. They're really cheap, they're designed to be early game units, they don't have much armor at all, but they deal very high damage, and it's splash damage. So 15 slow speed, but splash attack, so they can deal damage to other individuals that get caught in the arc. So this is not kind of a mace splash. A mace weapon splash is just like a circle around you, but these are actually arc attack splash. And the damage is very heavily skewed to armor piercing, which is very nice. So these are heavy hitters, but they're very weak in terms of their defensive stat. So you almost have to use these as ambush units, and that's fine. And you can definitely find stock on these guys, and I think they also cause scare by themselves. Yep, they do. And they make for really good shock troops. So if you want to find yourself a unit to ambush and charge out at the enemy, these would be your guy. Very high charge bonus as well. And then we have a completely different playstyle with the other White Tiger unit in the White Tiger Raiders. These are obviously bow units, but you notice they have a shield on the back and a spear. So they're dual weapon. You can swap between the two. They can be range or they can be polearm. They're mainly designed to be range. And the reason why I say that is because they have stock by themselves. You don't need a general for this. And they also have snipe. Snipe is really good in the game. because snipe allows you to remain hidden when you are firing your weapon. So for a ranged unit like this, you can hide in any terrain and then fire and stay hidden, which means you can apply poison perfectly. So there's so many usage of this unit. You can have them sneak into settlements to take gates for free because they have stock. And then if you want to flank enemy units and stay hidden while doing so, you can use these guys for that. And if you want to maximize your damage, you can have them sit there, fire off one volley of poison shot at each of your enemies, wait 15 seconds, reapply, rinse and repeat until you murder everyone and no one will know you're there. They're perfect for that because they have the same setup damage, so 35-18. This should be 25-15 as base, just as reference, but pretty fast firing rate, very good range, 48 ammo. Very, very strong unit because you have the option for the poison arrow, and because they have a shield on their back, they get 60% range block chance, which makes them wonderful. Now, they are designed to be a blue unit, which means they don't get charge reflect, even though they have a spear. However, they do have access to the shield wall formation, which means they can pick up charge reflector if they're in this formation. And you are not going to get caught off guard with this unit because this unit is always invisible. So you're going to catch the enemy off guard with formations like this, and you can even surprise the enemy cavalry by leading them to charge into one of these spear walls that was otherwise invisible to the enemy. So they're quite nice and one of the better units for the Bandit faction. And this is exclusive to Yanbaihu, as other factions cannot acquire any number of these from the reform tree. And then moving on, we are going to take a look at Zhang Yan's unit. And Zhang Yan's units are called the Black Mountain units. So there's three variations. There is the Black Mountain Outlaws. These are the ones that's shared among the factions. You can get these on the reform tree. I think you only get 2 of these, so it's not a lot. And they're the cheapest, weakest one. They're your anti-cavalry units. What's special about Zhang Yan's Black Mountain unit, if you want to sum it up, is they cause scare, they have high charge, they're designed to be ambush units because Zhang Yan can ambush offensively in the game. So you can almost consistently trigger ambush, so his units always can gap close. So they're designed to have high charge and good damage, cause scare, and you also have high evasion on these troops because they can last a while. They're not going to get picked off before they get into melee combat, and that's what makes them a bit strong. And then moving on, we have a different variation in dual axe. So obviously axe gives them shield breaker, they have the same cause scare, they have the same guerrilla deployment, you're on ambush, you have high charge, high damage, 30 attack speed for a unit that has dual wielding, very good. 13-33 distribution of damage, also very good. Still high evasion, same design. And then you have your hybrid unit, which is supposedly your strongest unit, but in my opinion it's not that good because you are given high charge, but you are also given a bow. But because you have a bow, you only have one axe, so your damage is lower. And the damage is lower to the point where you have the damage setup of the axe band, which is quite low in terms of damage output, but you do have high charge. And in terms of your archery skills, you have the same setup. It's the standard archer damage. You do have a lot of ammo, but unlike what we seen earlier, you don't have snipe. Snipe is what make bandit archers strong because you can apply poison perfectly. So it loses out in that aspect and it kind of becomes this jack of all trade but master of none type of unit. Whereas you might just prefer these guys because you can utilize them in the way they're being designed to. You charge in with these guys to deal damage, whereas these, you want to hold them back and then they can charge when the enemy get close, but then it's them charging you, not you charging them. So kind of defeats the purpose in my mind. Then finally we have Zhengjiang, the last of our bandit faction, the bandit queen herself, and she has only 2 units. And starting on the right here is the basic version. They're called hidden axes. They also cause scare. So on the surface, you might think they're designed quite like what we just seen. That's true. They have the dual axe, high damage, 1333, high charge, but they are dual wielding bows. But unlike the hunters we just seen, these guys have the dual axe as their primary. So they're deemed a melee infantry, and the bow portion is just secondary. So they have very low ammo because of that, only 6 ammo. That is actually really low, but they have really high attack to make up for it. So you can think of them as the hybrid version of this unit plus a small amount of bow from this unit. And on top of that, they have snipe and stock, and they also cause scare. So in all aspects, they combine what's good of this unit and this unit and this unit. So even though they don't have 6 ammo, they can maximize poison damage with that ammo. They can sneak wherever they want, and when you want to charge them, they can charge very easily with high charge bonus and high damage and cause scare after they sneaking themselves into enemy town, fire off 6 poison arrows into the enemy, weaken them, then charge in, deal damage. So they're all-rounders, very, very nice. And all factions can get a couple of these guys, I think 2 from the reform tree. The higher tier one is actually where the problem starts for Zhengjiang's faction. So these are the higher tier Fists of the Bandit Queen. You can't get these on the reform tree. But if you notice on the skill here, something is missing here. What happened to Snipe and Stock? You have an upgraded version with better armor, but you lost what's essential for the sneaking poison arrow tactic. You have more ammo, but you can't do it while you stay hidden. So that's a big drawback for these units. You get about 20, 23 extra charge bonus, 11 extra morale, and obviously a lot more armor between these two units, but you also lose speed for that. And you can't even hide on any terrain. There's no stock on this unit. So all signs point to this upgrade being a terrible upgrade, and you just want to spam hidden axes instead, because you don't really need the armor. You're catching a lot of units by surprise. You would love to have the extra ammo, but even if you don't, I think you prefer to be able to fire off all your ammo while staying hidden. So that's going to be it for all the Bandit unique units. We're going to hop back to the tier list and rank all these units alongside all the other available units you can get as the Bandit faction. So let's hop back to the list. Alrighty, after taking a look at all these Bandit units, we are now going to be ranking all these units now. But before we get into that, please remember that this tier list is a reflection of my personal opinions based on my experience playing single player romance campaigns on legendary difficulty. And all the figures and stats that you have just seen are based on large unit size on patch 1.6.1. So if you're watching in the future or playing on a different unit size, please adjust accordingly. So kicking things off, we're going to be ranking the units according to their availability first, because availability is actually a big factor in how we rank these units. We have ranked many of these units before with their own respective factions, and some of them will receive a very similar ranking to what they got when you rank them with their own factions, but others will actually get dramatically different rankings. And the reason for that is because we have to consider this tier list from the perspective of the Bandit faction. For example, you might be missing a really good melee cavalry. So when we get to the melee cavalry, maybe a bad melee cavalry from before suddenly becomes really good because the Bandit faction lacked that unit. Or maybe a really good unit from before now has a different type of competitor among the Bandit roster, so it's no longer as competitive. And then some units that receive really poor rankings among their own factions because there was a cheaper, more efficient replacement, well, that replacement might not be here now, so their value would rise. So just be mindful of that. I'll try to remind everyone what I ranked some of these units originally and give some reasons to why they might be ranked very differently here when that situation arises. But to understand how the limited quantity affect things, we have to first start off with units that are always available in infinite number of qualities. And starting things off, we have the Bandit Warrior. So kicking it off, we have the standard Bandit unit. These guys are the axe weapon users, dual axe, high attack, but they have no shield and they have a very low charge bonus for what they're designed to do. And they have many competitors on this roster. So because of those reasons, and we're going to see some of these competitors come up, these units are going to drop to the D tier because they're not designed to do what they're designed to do, if that makes sense. Their stats do not support their design. The design is for an ambush charger assault troop, but they don't have the charge to do that. So they're going to be quite low on our list. Then next up, we have the Bandit Gang. This is the spear unit. They're decent frontline units. They have pretty good armor for a militia quality unit. Obviously, it lacks any formation. That's the true weakness. But it has good enough range block chance with the shield, and it has the charge reflector to do its job. And because it's readily available, as in you can recruit these guys from the beginning of the game, I think they have a decent amount of value in any army. But they do have some other competitors coming up as well, so they're not going to jump to S or anything crazy. These guys are going to be a B tier unit. They're going to be great in the early game, but they will fall off pretty quickly once you pick up some decent reforms or you get access to some other better units. And then we're going to see the Bandit Hunters. These are the archer unit. They're pretty much archers compared to the stats of the Hun factions. Now, obviously, archers are not made available, but we're going to see very soon another unit is made available. And because of that, they are not going to be ranked very high because they actually cost a lot more than many of the standard beginning range units, which includes archers, archer militias, and crossbow units. So they're actually going to only receive a C rank here. And we're going to see a unit that's actually going to have great value very soon. And then the next unit is the Bandit Marauders. These are the melee cavalry. And the problem with these units is they are not very good at what they're designed to do. So they're going to drop to C as well. We remember they only have 20% range block chance and they have pretty low charge as well. So not going to get a really high rank here. Then we have the Bandit Raiders. Now these guys, unfortunately, are going to get a ridiculously high ranking from us, because if we look down the list, even though you're going to see a lot of shock cavalries, they're going to be only available through reforms and in limited quantities. And we all know the value of cavalry units in the game. So the only consistent competition that this Bandit Marauder unit has is this unit right here, which, if you don't recognize it, it's a Peasant Raider. It's one of the worst shock cavalry units in the base game, and this Peasant Raider is available for all Bandit factions in unlimited quantity, and it's not very good. So, because they're available, they're actually going to jump into the S tier here. So, that's just a necessary bump because availability is very good value here. Then we run into 4 units which are very familiar. They're Axe Band, Crossbowmen, Peasant Band, and Peasant Raider. These 4 units are given to the Bandit faction from the Hun roster as units that are always available to them in unlimited quantity with the right class. So if you're Bandit Sentinel, you can always recruit Axe Band. If you're a Bandit Strategist, you can always recruit the Crossbowmen. If you're a Bandit Champion, you can always recruit the Peasant Band. And if you're a Bandit Vanguard, you can always recruit the Peasant Raider. Unfortunately, if you're a Bandit Commander, there is no unit that you can recruit. They didn't give the bandits a yellow unit. So we only have these 4, and they're quite important because they all play a certain role. So the Axe Raider suffers a little bit here in terms of their value in the Bandit faction. For the Hun roster, I give these units an A rank. And the reason for that is the Hun roster don't have axe users. So if you want something to debuff enemy shield, the Axe Band is your go-to option. And it's really cheap and you get them really early. Here, there are tons of axe users among the Bandit faction. And all the axe users here tend to be dual wielding and tend to have really high armor piercing damage, almost double the amount of an axe band unit. So the axe band unit is no longer that special here, so they're not going to get the A rank, but they have decent charge at 115, which is a lot higher than some of these cavalry that we're talking about, and they have a shield that's 55. So we're going to move them to the B tier here. They're going to be very similar to the polearm unit. They have a shield, they can be decent frontline, they can be decent charging unit, not high sustained damage, but decent enough melee charge to make up for it. Then we have the crossbowmen, which we gave a A rank to in the base game because they have the unique armor piercing damage. They fire a little bit slow, but they get extra range and they're cheap. In this case, they're actually really cheap because they're cheaper than bandit hunters. And because you can recruit crossbowmen in large numbers, and because fire arrows is not that easily acquired by many of the bandit generals on the skill tree, it's not like the same skill tree as the Hun generals, the crossbowman doesn't lose out too much. Now you can argue that poison arrow is quite good, but it's only good if you have snipe, because you need to time your volleys. You can't just sit there and fire it all out with the enemy charge at you. Ideally, you want to fire and wait, and you can only do that if you have snipe. So it doesn't have any sniping competition here. This unit's not that good. So this is actually going to jump to S tier, and this is the range unit you want to recruit in your armies early on before you get better units from reforms or faction unique units. Then the next two units got D ranks when we did their ranking with the Han roster. They're the Peasant Band and Peasant Raiders. Now, part of those reasons is because you actually needed Han reforms to get these guys. So they were very bad because they were the low tier units. Here, they're still really bad even though you don't need reforms for them. They're just very bad units. So both of them are going to get D rank as well. There is nothing that makes them special. In the Han roster, perhaps you could argue that some of them are A, very cheap, and B, has the Raider trait, which can burn down houses. Well, guess what? All the bandits have Raider trait. All of them like to burn down houses. And they have better stat than these units. So not very good. Still going to be D tier. Then we have our two siege weapons, which are available to all bandit strategists, just like they're available to all Han strategists from the beginning of the game. They're pricey. They're very good. I talked about them many times, not just in tier lists, but in campaigns as well. And we're going to do the same thing. The trebuchet, I feel like, is strictly better than the crossbow in almost 99% of the situations. Therefore, you would always just want to build the trebuchet and never build any crossbow. So they're going to get the polar opposite end of the ranking here. Trebuchet S, crossbow D. And then we have the last two units, which are available infinitely to the bandit factions, and only when you reach Emperor. So that's the restriction. You have to hit King rank. But once you hit King rank, you can recruit Protector of Heaven and Defender of Earth as much as you want. And that's actually pretty key, because many bandit Let's Plays or bandit campaigns will end up being a Protector of Heaven campaign. Because look at all units we have available to us. The Protector of Heaven beats everything here. You want them all the time. Like, compare them to this. There's no formation on these guys, 55% range block chance, 40% from melee evasion, just 40% from range block chance just for the fact they're nimble and can dodge and skilled. And then they also can get the spear wall for the spear units, and that's, I think, 15% added. So they would do equally well in terms of against arrow, and probably better because you're heavily armored, so you take away part of that enemy range damage. And then you have way higher attack, way higher charge. So bandit factions, once they hit King, pretty much just spam Protector of Heaven, and that's the way to go. And they're going to be S tier. Not much to say about that. Defender of Earth, however, it's a little bit different. They still suffer from their lack of range, and although bomb arrows are pretty nice, they do have some splash damage. They're little mini artilleries, but you have real artilleries. And if you want the suppression effect, you have poison arrows. So they don't stand out very much here, and they're going to drop to what they were before. they were B. They were these situational units you might want to use to have some fun, but they're not super high value, but they're not bad either. They have good stats. So they're going to be B rank. Then the next group of units we see here, these 4 are Yanbaihu's faction unique unit. These 2 right here are Zhengjiang's faction unique unit. And then these 3 here are Zhang Yan's faction unique unit. So we're going to talk about the faction unique units. And starting things off, we have what's here is the Yue tribesmen. They are available on the reform tree for other bandit factions. You can get 6 of these. Remember, these are basically higher charge spear warrior clones with slightly better armor. And because of that, they're not terrible. Spear warriors got a decent ranking when we talked about them, and they're going to get a decent ranking too. They're going to be B rank. They might be even higher value if you strictly use them for ambush battles, but because they're not available to all factions, and the faction that they're available to, Yanbaihu, doesn't actually play heavily ambush style, they're not going to get the A tier rank. Otherwise, they might get. Then the next unit is the Yue Remnant Warriors. You can also get 6 of these from the reform tree. I believe 3 from each reform, and there's 2 reform that give these. And you can think of these as super high damage, decent charge, decent armor infantry unit that costs a bit more than certain unit that we're going to bump into. So let me spoil a little bit. The unit that's currently below this, if you don't remember the look, this is called People's Warband. This is from the Yellow Turban roster. And you might remember Huanglao Paragons from Yellow Turbans, those super high base damage dual sword users that only had half size. People's Warband is a slightly toned down damage version of that with regular size. Well, guess what? They happen to be using the same pair of sabers. So the Yue Remnant Warriors are these super high base damage users with higher charge and also way higher armor, about 25 points of armor higher. I think these have 45, these have 20. You do cost a bit more, about 40 more, I believe, in terms of the upkeep cost, but you also have Encourage. So I think these are actually outstanding units. If you're using them as Yanbaihu's faction, they will do very well for you to spam and charge in because they're available for you without restrictions. But for other factions, there will be only 6 of these, which is still decent enough to field the army. So I think because of their combined stats, they're just really good stats. I'm going to actually put these into the S tier. They can be a really good assault troop for you. And then next up, we have the White Tiger Warriors. So basically, they are really cheap. Their upkeep's about 105, is one of the cheapest units that's available to bandit factions. And for that price, they have ridiculously high charge, 124, I believe. They have an axe weapon, obviously. It has scare, it has splash damage, and it has really high attack damage. It's like 40 armor piercing, I believe, and it can be boosted a little bit to about 46. And even the base damage part is pretty good, around 20 something. Attack speed is obviously a little slow, and definitely the weakness is low survivability. Very low melee evasion, very, very low armor. I think 7%, the lowest you can get. But they're perfectly designed for ambush battles, which we did mention, not the best thing for Yanbaihu's faction. And these are available on Reform Tree, but you only get 2 of them. So not a lot of flexibility for other factions to utilize them, and that's going to hold them back a little bit because you can't spam these, even though they're low cost. For Yanbaihu, these are S tier. For other factions, these are only A tier. So I think we averaged that out a little bit between the 3 factions. I'm going to just put them into A tier here. And then next up, we have the White Tiger Raiders. These are exclusive for Yanbaihu, which would knock them down a peg, except they're just so good. They have Snipe, they have Stock, they have Poison Arrow to utilize both of that. They have a shield and a spear as a backup weapon. The shield has base 60% range block chance. They have access to Shield Wall, the spear variant, which gives them charge reflection, even though they are technically a blue unit. So they have great ammo and great damage, and they can still turn into anti-cavalry that's invisible on the map. So there's nothing they can't do. Obviously, other 2 factions can't enjoy them, but I think because of all those things, they're going to be S tier for us. Then moving on, we have the 2 units that belong to Zhengjiang, Hidden Axes and Fist of the Bandit Queen. And Hidden Axes here are super similar to the unit we just talked about, except you don't have a lot of ammo because your primary weapon is dual axe. They still have Scare, Stalk, Snipe, and very high damage for dual axe with 30 attack speed, which is no penalties for dual wielding, and very high armor piercing damage at 30. 33 if you get the boost, 10% boost. And they have poison arrows on the 6 ammo that they do have, so they're also going to jump into S tier. And also, other faction can get them. You can get 2 of them from a reform tree. It's not a lot, but you would still get these because being stock, you can run in and take over towns without the enemy knowing because you're invisible on the map. But their upgraded version, the Fist of the Bandit Queens, loses what makes this unit special for a little bit of extra charge, a little bit extra morale, and extra armor, which is just terrible. So they're going to drop quite a bit. They're not going to be A tier. They're going to go all the way down to C tier because you probably would never recruit these. You just spam these guys. Don't get these. And then we move on to Zhang Yan's faction, which is designed to be an ambush faction. So we got to keep that in mind. Of the 3 unit, only the spear variant, the outlaws, are available to other factions. I think you only get 2 of these. All 3 of these have Scare. All 3 of these have decent charge. But if we compare them among themselves, which I think is a fair thing to do, because you will be deciding which one to recruit, what you will end up figuring out is the Marauders, really, really good. They're going to be A tier. They can't compete with these because they don't have the stock and snipe. They don't have dual weapons, so nothing too special there, but they're good charge units. And then we have the spear one who is going to fall short, not just by a little bit, but by quite a bit because they're designed to be charging units, so you don't really need to have a spear. You would almost go with dual axe all the time for that purpose. So they're going to go C. And then we have this very conflicted unit that has a bow, that has an axe, single axe, low damage. They have the same damage as the axe bands. They don't have a shield. And the bow part, no stock or snipe. So I don't know what they are designed to do. And they're going to drop all the way to C tier as well. And they're deemed the highest tier one. I think you need to be rank 5 to recruit these. I believe it's like rank 1, rank 3, rank 5. So don't know why you would ever want these. And then after we ranked all these bandit units and units that's always available, all the remaining units here are only available in very limited quantities. And they range from Naman units, which is right here, to Yellow Turban units, to nomadic tribal cavalry units, to Han units. So let's start things off with the new edition, the Naman units. We saw a patch change when the Furious Wild was released, and these were changed on the reform tree for the new extended territories. But I think in the future, when we get other expansion packs or other DLCs, we're going to see other modifications to the Bandit skill tree or the Bandit reform tree network, and we're going to see other unique units added in, just like these. And the ones that they got are not very strong ones. They got Naman Warriors, which is this first unit, the very basic warrior unit. And then they also got these, I think they're called Valley Tribesmen. So Valley Tribesmen are the saber units with shield, and the Naman Warriors are axe unit with shield. Both of them have the weakness to fire, and both of them aren't very good in the original ranking. I think Naman Warrior was a C tier unit, and I believe Valley Tribesman was a B tier unit. And you can get 4 Valley Tribesmen and 6 Naman Warriors through reforms. And what we're going to do here for these units is kind of compared to what's available all the time. And you would almost never recruit these as a bandit faction because you have Axe Band. That's always available. So they drop a ton of value, and you're going to see them drop to D tier. The Valley Tribesmen, however, is actually decently strong. They have good defense, they have good damage, good charge. So I'm going to actually put them around the same tier as the other unit that kind of does the same thing. Now, obviously, you get less of these, but they're good quality. I think they have higher damage than these, much higher. So you would go for these once you get the 4 that's available. Then moving on, we have Fire Archers, which got these awesome S tier ranking when we ranked them for the Numman factions because they specialize in killing other Numman tribes. Here, the situation is a bit different. You have plenty of archers that can get fire arrows. These guys default to fire arrows and they can't switch arrows. So it's not like you can switch them to poison. And that's going to hold them back. And I believe you can only get 4 of these. So that's also not good. They're definitely not going to be S tier here. And they're going to drop instead to, I think, A tier. They're not bad. You know, their competitor here, the one that's always available, is this Bandit Hunter, which we already established is not very good. So might as well go for these. I think the always fire is a good thing because you don't have to put them on a general that has that skill unlocked. So that frees you up quite a bit. Not a bad unit. Then we have Javelin Thrower. These are the blue variant. They're not the cool ones that can turtle up and throw javelins. They just can throw javelins. They have a backup spear and shield, but no charge reflection, no formations. We give these a C rank when we rank the Numman units, and I think that's a pretty fair rank here as well. They're going to stay C rank here. The javelins themselves are decent damage. Very high armor piercing, if you remember, I think 55. So that part is good, but you only get, I think, 4 of these as well, and they're just not that special where you would design an army around them. You have other competitors like fire arrows that's same reforms. You basically get like 2 of these and 2 of these on the reforms. And then you also might just opt for poison arrows, just more flexibility as a bandit faction. So they're going to get the same rank as their counterpart that's competing against them. Bandit hunters, better armor piercing, limited quantity, no access to poison. So just a little bit different unit. And then we have slingers. You actually get a ton of slingers. You can get 8 Numman slingers from the reform tree. Slingers got a pretty decent ranking when we rank them. We rank them B because they have super high ammo and the damage is not bad. It's heavily skewed towards base damage, but it's decent. And the issue with slingers here and also with the javelin here, which we didn't mention, is that you're now competing against other units with 200 range. You have limited range. Whereas when you were in the Numman faction, aside from the fire archer, everything else had limited range. Whether you threw axes, you blew darts, you threw javelins, or you threw rocks, everyone had limited range. Like here, everyone has 200 range. You're the only ones with really bad range. So you would almost never recruit these guys, even if you get the reform. So here they're going to drop down to D because they're low damage variants of these with about half the range. So why would you ever recruit these? Then we move on to yellow turban units, starting with some very excellent cavalry. These are virtuous noblemen. They're the axe-wielding cavalry with the shield. They are S tier in the original yellow turban ranking because yellow turbans obviously lacked a lot of cavalry options. I think there were only 4. Here, you only can get 3 of these. They're basically Jian units with better damage. Also use the axe, has higher armor as well. But I can't give them S tier here because of a few things. One, you don't have the same setup where you can get multiple ones of these. You can only get 3, and I think they're on 3 separate reforms, so you can get 1 at a time. So it's not like you can build an army around these. I think this is going to be a very similar trend. Unless you have like a super good unit down here where you can get limited quantities, they're going to drop a couple of ranks just because availability is an issue. So instead of S, they're still going to be A. It's not bad. Just you can't build your strategy around these guys. Then the next unit that we have here is another yellow turban units. These are the White Wave Horsemen's, and you can get 2 of these. They were originally S tier, and the reason why they were S tier is somehow as a melee, they're shot cavalry, but they got the melee cavalry range block chance bonus, and they have 250 charge for, as a unit that can block arrows. They have the shield, 45%. They were mini Jade Dragons, and there's still mini Jade Dragons here, and that's going to be pretty good. And because of that, I think they're also going to go A tier here. Availability, once again, holding things back a little bit. So we're going to be fair here with the rankings, even though I think they could be borderline S. just because the only shock cavalry you're competing against is right here, and 250 charge versus like 150 charge, big difference. Actually, I'm going to move them up. I think you just need shock cavalries in the bandit factions, and if you have one, doesn't matter if you only have two, you're recruiting them always because they're just way superior. Whereas this guy doesn't have as much charge, you have less sub 200, so you're kind of competing against this unit too in terms of where you're placing them, and you don't have a role as a ammo, like a arrow tank. You don't tank enemy, arrows. You're not a sponge because you don't really have nobility traits. Then moving on, this unit right here is the horseback huntmen. They also got S tier ranking because they were super cheap, and they're still super cheap. You can only get 2 of these, unfortunately. They're not only super cheap, I think they cost like 110 upkeep. For reference, this unit 105, this unit 110 for cavalry, ridiculous. They're also the highest firing rate cavalry unit in the game. They outshoot mounted archers, they outshoot Xianbei archers, they outshoot Qiang archers. I think they have like 60 attack speed, which is ridiculous. So they're really good. And for horse archer unit, you don't want a lot of them. You only want maybe 1 or 2 per army, and you can only get 2 of these, so they work out perfectly. You want to recruit them right away. Then we have People's Warband. So People's Warband we rated quite high when we rated the units for the yellow turbans, and they're still quite good, but they're not going to be as high. They're going to drop down a little bit. They're going to drop down to B rank. So they went from S to B. Now the reason's pretty simple, because they have a clone that's available from the bandit roster, and you can get 6 of these for the 2 factions that it's not named Yanbaihu. But for People's Warband, you can only get I think 4. Actually, 2. I think only 2. There's only 1 reform with them. Or actually, maybe 2. Actually, I think 2. I think you only get 2 of these. And if you're playing as Yanbaihu, you can get infinite number of these. And they are better armored with more charge. So you would always recruit these and never these. Now, if you're playing a faction that doesn't get unlimited number and you want more of them, sure, you will throw these in. But these will be your first choice. These will be your second choice. So they're going to drop quite a bit. They had less competition among the Yellow Turban troops. Then we have the Yellow Sky Herald. So these are the unbreakable unit that also had unruly, means they can run off and do attacks randomly. They got a B rank when we ranked them. You can get 2 of them. They have decent damage. It's not super high. I think it's like a 30 attack speed, 11 base, 22 armor piercing. They also have decent charge, 89, and their selling point is they're unbreakable. So it's going to take the enemy a long time to get through these guys. Well, they will return decent damage. They were B rank. Here, they're going to stay B rank because unbreakable units just get a little bit of bonus here. And then you have the White Wave Veterans. These are the infantry version of the White Wave units. They got a D rank when we originally ranked them for Yellow Turbans because there were so many infantry competitors. And here, they're going to be a little bit better than D. So they are a shielded infantry, which you don't have too many of here. Of course, you can only get a few of these. I think you can only get 2 of these as well. And they have high charge, 134. And the competitor here is going to be different. Yellow Turban competitors or other Yellow Turban infantry units that had ridiculously high charge and are super cheap. Here, the competitor is against the likes of Saber Infantry or Jian Sword Guard, because that's what they're competing against, or maybe Axe Band and Valley Tribesmen. And against these units, they compare quite well. So they're going to actually go to B tier, because they're very similar to Valley Tribesmen in what you get for them. And then moving on, we have the last Yellow Turban, actually not the last, but another Yellow Turban unit here in the Scholar Warrior. You can get 3 of these. These drop to D tier when we rank them for the Yellow Turban, because of things like Wang Lao's Paragon, which had the same exact weapon damage as these guys. Super high, but a lot cheaper. I think 1/4 the cost. Well, guess what? Huang Lao Paragons are not here anymore. So for the 3 that you get here, they're really good because they have 30 attack speed, 65 base before boost, 16 armor piercing before boost, 60 evasion, 40% range block chance, Very good charge, over 100, immune to fatigue, encourage, all great things. You would automatically recruit these. These are S tier here, whereas they were D tier in the Yellow Turbans. How the things have turned. And then we have Militia of Virtue. These are the Guan units. They use the staff, no tip, high base damage, almost non-existent armor piercing. I think it's like 45-2, and I think only 20 attack speed. They're polearm units. You can't get many of these here. I think you can only get 2 of these as the Bandit factions, and they are low charge, which was what was holding them back in our original ranking. They only got a B rank, and you would think they'll be ranked way lower as polearm units without shield, low charge, almost no attack damage. Why did they get B? Because they had fatigue immune, and fatigue immunity is just still very good. You can have these guys hold a position for a long time by sacrificing them. So they're going to hold on to their B position, similar to the Yellow Sky Herald, which has some weaknesses, but because they're not fatigue immune. They are fatigue immune, but they're also unbreakable. So they're fatigue immune and unbreakable. These guys are unbreakable and unruly. So that's the combination here. So they're going to get this position because of unbreakable. Then there's a Reclaimer unit. You guys remember this guy? This guy is the Spear Guard clone that has no turtle. And because they were the clone with no turtle, they got a D rank. Here, they're not as bad. They're going to drop to C. They're still not as good as these guys. Because if you don't have turtle, you're pretty much these guys. Now, you could argue that they still have shield wall. So they will have higher range block chance. But you can only get 1 Reclaimer in all of the Bandit reform. So are these really your frontline units? No. You will recruit that one, but this is still the mainstay of your army. So they're not going to get ranked higher than B. Not available, basically. Then we have the 3 Tiang units. We rank these so many times, you can get 2 of each, and you're automatically going to recruit these. Fatigue immune, high damage, high charge, ridiculous amount of ammo, ridiculously high damage, still decent charge, great units. And then we have Xianbei Cavalry. So this is the Xianbei Rider. These didn't get such a high rank in the 8 Princes. These got C tier. They're pretty much Lance Cavalry with fatigue immunity that costed more. Well, guess what? Lance Cavalry is also available. You can get 3 of these as Bandit factions, and the Xiongnu Riders here, no, Xianbei Rider, you can only get 2 of them. So they're going to run to the exact same situation, and they're going to stay C tier. And we might as well dump the Lance Cavalry here as well. Lance Cavalry had C tier among the Han units. They, unfortunately, despite being better than the comparison here, are also going to be C tier. Because we do have a ton of different shock cavalry options that are either more available or just straight better. There's 2 right here. And you're going to have a couple more coming up right here. So the next competitors here are the Xiongnu Cavalry and the Xiongnu Cataphracts, both of which are really good. You can actually get 4 Xiongnu Cavalry and 2 Xiongnu Cataphracts. And these all had A ranks when we ranked them for the 8 Princes. And here they're also going to be A rank. So they're pretty much mini J Dragons, and high charge, shield 45%, high armor for this one, low armor but high speed, both very good. They would be S tier, but they can't outcompete these guys, and they also are limited in quantity, which is a thing that's holding them back. Now compare them to this unit here, why this one got S and these got A. That's actually a good question, and I'm thinking about that right now. So these are White Wave Horsemen, 250 charge, decent speed. So these 2 are very comparable. And I think the only thing that gives this advantage is if you put this on general with nobility, it gets 20% additional range block chance. Because this was the one mistake we found when we ranked Yellow Turbans. It benefited from a melee cavalry bonus. I'm going to drag it down, just to be fair. I think this guy wins because they're heavily available, and this guy wins because he's fatigue immune and higher charge. So these 3 are all very similar, including that one. They're all going to stay A. Let's be consistent here. Yeah, let's do that. And then we have two units that are super similar, exact same stat, except for these guys have fatigue resistance. That's really not going to separate them that much, especially when these guys exist. I think you can get 3 mounted archers and 2 Xianbei archers, horse archers. Both of these are going to get A rank. They're good. You'll get them. You only need about 1 per army. They can't beat the horseback huntsman. Higher firing rate, also way cheaper. 110 versus like 185. So big difference here. And then we have our melee cavalry, the Hun cavalry. It's not just melee. They have the Raider cavalry right here. Let's throw the Raider cavalry up here first. Raider cavalries can get 5 of, and they were D tier in original ranking. They're still going to be D tier here because they are very similar to the Peasant Raiders, and the Peasant Raiders are available in infinite quantity and got D tier here because these guys are better. Same situation, except for these only have 5, so these are actually way worse than these and way worse than these. Then we have the Jian Swords Guard cavalry and the Saber cavalry. When we rank these in the Han roster, they were basically very comparable units, except for the Saber cavalry required a reform but were much cheaper and had a better defense and higher charge than these units, so we rank them a lot higher. Here, both of them are rare and both of them require reforms. You can get 3 Jian Sword Guard and 2 Saber cavalry, very similar, and they're going to receive pretty much very similar rankings here. They're both going to go A tier here because cavalry is just really good. You don't get many cavalry, so you see all the cavalries pretty much landed in A tier unless they were just not as good. Like, you wouldn't rely on these two because they fit the same role as these. They don't have a shield or anything special about them, no extra armor, fatigue resistant, right? And then slightly higher charge, but higher cost and limited quantity. So they lose out quite a bit, whereas these guys all have something special going for them. Then we get to the infantry version of the 2 unit we just decided. This is the Jian Sword Guard, this is the Saber infantry. And these 2 units had the same exact issue as these 2 units when we ranked them. One was cheaper, required a reform, pretty much clones, but because they're cheaper, they were better. Where here, both run into the same exact situation. Both are limited. You can get 3 of these guys. And then for the Jian Sword guy, you can also get 3. And they're going to be very similar here. We're not going to rank them too terribly. I think the Saber is going to get a slight bump against these guys. I think originally these were A, these were D. We made it pretty extreme. Here, not so much. I think these can still be A because the value is there. These guys are going to be B. I'm not going to drop them too much because you can get 3. They're kind of like what these unit does, except for they do it better. I guess they fit exactly where the White Wave Veteran is. So that thing's pretty fair with the Valley Tribesmen. They are pretty much fitting the same role. And then we have actual Spear Guards. You can only get 2 of these. These are turtle units. And if you notice, so far, there are no turtle units available for the Bandit factions. So because of that, they get extra value. These guys are going to be S tier units because these are the only 2 turtle units you can get in the game for Bandit factions. And once you get them, you definitely want to use them to help you take interior towers. They fit a very unique role. You might want to only give 1 to each army that you have because they're pretty precious, and you only need 1 turtle unit to steal towers. Obviously, there's other ways to steal towers. Invisible stock units, which are also S tier, so they fit the same role. Then G Infantry is actually the unit that's readily available, similar to the Nanman Slingers. You can get 8 of these, except for you can only get 1 from each reform, so it's like 8 different reforms. It's actually quite a pain, whereas these are 4 with 2 on each reform. Well, G Infantry were never rated really highly. They were D tier. They costed too much for what they offered without any shield. Here, same thing. You have these guys, the Bandit Gang. They would fit all the need you would want with these guys in unlimited quantity, so they're still D tier. Then we have a couple range units. You can get archers, and plural here is used pretty loosely because you can only get 2 of these. These were A tier. Here they're going to drop a little bit. They're going to drop to B tier because you almost would never recruit these. I guess if you get the reform you would, but like your competitors are these, which have the same damage profile, and these are unlimited. Now, I would still... Let's pause for a second and drag them down here. Because you can only get 2 of these. These are 2 different reforms, quite hard to get, whereas these are always available, same damage profile. Yeah, I think they would match up perfectly here. Because you always have crossbow. That's why crossbow got S. You can get these whenever you want, always available. And speaking of crossbow, we have heavy crossbow. The heavy crossbow you can get on reforms. I think you can get 4 of these. They were D rank originally, and here they're still going to be D rank because you have the regular crossbow with the same exact damage, cheaper price, always available. Why would you bother to get these on the reforms? It doesn't benefit you at all. Then we have repeating crossbowmen. You can get 6 of these, which is actually a pretty good number. You can actually fit them into your army. They were B rank originally. We're going to stick them to B rank. They fit a pretty unique role of suppression, although they do have some stiff competition as the poison arrow here does apply suppression as well, and that's available on pretty much all archers for the Bandit unit, but they do dump out a lot of damage rapidly. Many people think they're low damage, but they're actually pretty high damage. If you test it out, have a shot cavalry unit charge at you in custom battle. We actually have a video on this where we tested all the archer unit. And the repeating crossbowman is the only unit that can rout a lancer militia as he's charging towards the archer unit. So a single unit of these will just wipe one out, whereas no other range units, not even Onyx Dragons, can do that. Then the last unit here is an E Archer. Very strange to be included. It's a reform that's in the E region. And you can get 2 of these. These were pretty good units, although when we ranked them on the faction unique ranking list, we only gave them a C. Because I thought, are they good replacement units for regular Han factions? No, because regular Han faction has Onyx Dragons. But here, we don't have that problem. So they're actually going to move up quite a bit. We're going to move them up to A, where the fire arrows are, because they have higher damage than archers. They have higher firing rate. They also can fire on the move. They have better stats as a whole. So they're going to move to the A rank. And that's going to be it for our tier list here. We fit all 56 units here. Took us a while, but we finally got it done. And this is going to wrap up our unit tier list series for the channel. Hope you guys enjoyed all these videos. And if you missed out any of them, there's the playlist link in the description below. And we'll see you guys next time. Bye!